DeAnne Julius, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, can I just ask your opinion about what's been happening with all the recent data that's been coming out? What do you make of it? GDP shock number and inflation still rising?
Well, I think the data have been a bit shocking, but shocking on both sides in a way. The GDP number falling was certainly a big surprise, but I think there's a weather factor there, and we just don't have much experience adjusting for that kind of shocking weather we had in December. Inflation was particularly high. I think it might get worse as the VAT increase gets fed through post-January sales into what's happening in the economy. But on the other hand, the survey data has been pretty strong, both manufacturing and services. So we are seeing the kind of mixed picture, fluctuating data that adds to uncertainty, but also probably means the economy is at an inflection point.
And do you think the fourth quarter GDP number was a temporary blip?
I think it probably was. I think there'll probably be some revisions, as there often is. There'll probably be some revisions. And taking the year as a whole, where the Q2 figure was very high because of construction, I suspect the whole thing will average out around 2% for the year.
And how do you think all that data how's that feeding into the MPC's debate this week?
Well, I suspect that they're paying more attention to the inflation number than to the GDP figure. They will be debating how much of it is news and how much of it is noise, how much is temporary, how much isn't. And you've seen recently in the speeches, the one by the governor, but also by Andrew Sentence in the last few weeks, that there's an active debate going on inside the committee about what really causes inflation, what's temporary, what's external, what's domestic. And I think that is a very important debate that they have.
Do you think they should be raising interest rates this week?
I think, and have thought for a while, that it was time to begin very gradually raising rates. Whether they should do it this week, for me, is a tactical question. The fact that there is a bit of a confidence issue right now in the British economy might mean that they ought to wait a little bit longer. But certainly next month or the month following, depending on what the news flow looks like, I think they need to take the opportunity to change direction, get off the floor, and begin to raise rates.
If they didn't, do you think they would suffer even more criticism about their credibility, and do you think they have a problem now?
Well, I think there is a credibility problem. It seems to me that it's both because their forecasts have been badly underestimating what's actually happened to inflation, and that raises questions about the strength of the forecast, the robustness of the model, something that the Fathom group has addressed today. But it also is a matter of how important expectations are. Expectations are partly formed by the past, by the actual inflation figures, and those have not been good, and partly formed by looking ahead, looking to the future, looking at whether the people believe the Bank of England will indeed bring inflation back to target. And the balance of those two forces, the current and the future, I think have changed against the MPC because the inflation outturns have actually been pretty poor.
And it seems the market's pricing in an interest rate rise for May. Do you think that's the most likely outcome, all things being equal?
I think if I had to place my bets on it, I guess I'd plump for May. That's an inflation report month. I expect the employment figures to look a little better by then. We'll know a little bit more about that Q4 GDP figure because we'll have the revisions. So I think May's probably a pretty good bet.
And do you think the economy is strong enough to withstand an interest rate rise?
I do. I think that we've had a number of quarters of pretty good growth. Corporate profits are doing very well in this economy, and the investment picture is picking up. Employment seems to be stagnant at the moment, but I don't expect unemployment to be going up. I expect it to be coming down because private sector job creation, I think, will more than offset public sector job destruction. So I think we're still in a normalization phase, and it's not going to be a particularly strong year, 2011, because consumers are still repaying debt, still trying to rebuild their own balance sheets. But the consumers are in reasonably good shape. Business is in very good shape from a financial point of view. It's the government that has the debt overhang, but they have a perfectly credible plan. So yes, I expect 2011 can certainly withstand some gradual increase in interest rates.
You think the government budget squeeze, that won't be cause too much of an obstacle to raising interest rates?
I don't think so, and I think actually one has to think about the counterfactual. I think we as an economy would be in much worse shape if the government had delayed coming up with a pretty tough fiscal plan to get us back on course. You only have to look across the channel and see the kind of borrowing rates that some of the Eurozone countries are facing. and realize that the UK, we sink or swim by our own policy here. So we've got to have a credible policy with the bond markets. I think we've got one, and it would be absolutely wrong to start shifting to some mythical plan B.
And just in the longer term, do you think that inflation will go back to the 2% target? Obviously, within the next year or 2 years, do you think there's a problem that may be sufficiently high for a foreseeable time?
I think there could be. I think that inflation expectations have a lot of inertia in them. And the difficulty is that wage bargainers and others will look at the actual inflation rate as they're beginning to try to increase wages. So for those sectors that have skill shortages, or for those sectors where labor is truly internationally competitive, at the top of companies, for example, we could well see that our high inflation gets embedded into parts of the wage bargaining system here, and I think that that's why I feel that the Bank of England needs to raise rates sooner rather than later. If it waits too long, then it's going to have to raise them quite significantly.
And just finally, the UK Treasury is already looking for a replacement for Andrew Sentence, who leaves the MPC later this year. Do you feel that there should be a female replacement? A lot of people are calling for that. Since Kate Barker left, there hasn't been a female member of the MPC. Do you think it's required for balance?
I wouldn't say it's required, but it seems to me pretty odd, given all the good women economists in this country, that if they can't find one. I happen to know a couple of people who've been approached, and one of the difficulties is that the MPC job is now a 3-day-a-week job, not a full-time job, and yet one is prohibited from doing anything else in the private sector in your other 2 days. So a good economist, male or female, who's already working in the city full-time and has a family to support, finds it a little difficult to take a pay cut and be forced to go into a job which doesn't pay as well and precludes them from doing other work. So the very structure of the MPC is a little bit of a problem.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.